Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. It's time again for us to join each other in a gracious guest episode, and I'm so excited that you're here today. So this is pretty exciting. Today is the day that we pick up where we left off, I think, before on one of my previous episodes talking about the heavens. And I don't have the episode number right in front of me here, but we're going to talk about stars today, sort of as a follow-up to some of my musings in an earlier episode called Space Isn't Space. And there's like air quotes there. The idea that there's more to it, I think, than just what we oftentimes reduce it to. So if you listen to the last episode of this show, it was really kind of unapologetically taking aim at reductionism. So if you haven't heard that episode, you should probably go back and check that out, because that really, I think, kind of sets the tone for some of what I want to just share with you today, and really just sort of tries to unravel the idea that life in general and all these particular moments in life where they can be touched by the numinous or wonder or marvel, we lose those opportunities because we just reduce it to its parts. And that's going to be a recurring theme in this episode today. So you might want to check that out. Before we get into this, though, I want to do two things. First of all, I was looking at my podcast stats over on Podbean. And Podbean is the website where I host this, the actual podcast URL is hosted there. And then that goes out to various other podcasting services many of you may be listening to. In fact, I think my biggest, in terms of the breakdown of who's using what, the biggest source of people getting the Gracious Guest Show seems to be through Apple Podcasts. So if you haven't done so already, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to give the show a nice review over there on Apple Podcasts. That really helps get the word out about the show. And then, on any other service, too, that you might be listening to, like through Google. You can get me through Google Play. You can get through Pocket Casts, Podcasts Addict, Stitcher, Spotify. There's another big kind of following through that. So those are some of the more popular services that people seem to use. And, but whatever you use, if you could use that process, whatever that particular service has to provide a review for the show, that'd be really great. That'd really help out a lot and help get the word spread about the Gracious Guest Show. Now that I'm just doing this show instead of my other radio program I was hosting for many years for our local Catholic radio station, I'm really hoping to kind of grow this program and really get some more guests on. I interviewed my brother about the Kanye West episode a few episodes back, which was really popular, and I'm hoping to do more of that and have kind of a blend of some of these shows like today where I'm just kind of sharing and kind of musing on some stuff, and then ones where I have a little bit more interview and discussion-based sort of program. So we're going to kind of mix it up a little bit, but it's always going to revolve around wonder and awe and the sort of deeper threads in life, the deeper currents. That's kind of what we go for here. So at any rate, I want to give a shout out to the following regions of the world where I have had some downloads, and I have no doubt that maybe some of these might be AI and that sort of thing, and that's kind of maybe a little creepy, Terminator type stuff. But at any rate, we're going to mention them anyway. So here we go. Fan shout outs of the Gracious Guest, Gracious Gang listeners in the United States of America. That's my country, of course, and 'tis of thee. So U.S., Canada, South Africa, UK. So we have a pretty big following, it seems, in South Africa and in the United Kingdom. So thank you all for joining us, and welcome. And we're not going to leave out the following: Australia, Mexico, Jordan, Germany, the Philippines, Ireland, India, Nigeria, Norway, Nepal, Poland, Slovakia, Saudi Arabia, Portugal, New Zealand, Spain, Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, Trinidad, Tobago, Morocco, Kuwait, South Korea, Kenya, Japan, France, Indonesia, Egypt, Denmark, Czech Republic, Colombia, Switzerland, Brazil, Taiwan, and then a category for others. So to you others, I don't know where others is, but Podbean lists you as others. So my apologies to you that your homeland is not being listed by name. I don't know if it's the moon or if it's some island that maybe most of us have never heard of, somewhere in the middle of the South Pacific or the Indian Ocean or up in the Arctic or whatever, wherever you are listening to this program. And by the way, I don't know what it counts. It might count U.S. if you're on like a Navy vessel or something like that. So whoever you are, however you found the Gracious Guest Show, thank you so much for spending some time with me here today and with the rest of the family of folks who like to tune in and just kind of muse on some of this stuff that hopefully raises our hearts and our minds above, the fray a little bit and kind of above the mundane, specifically through seemingly mundane things sometimes, to kind of look beyond it and to really find sources of joy and intriguing, marvelous sort of things. That's really what this show's all about. So we do that through, if you've never tuned in before, we do that through book reviews, movie reviews, just kind of life experiences, me sharing about that, and all sorts of different stuff. So go back and check out the wall, the feed, and kind of see what's there, and I really kind of think there's something for everybody on there. So that's the first thing I want to do. The second thing I want to do is, we haven't done this in a long time, far too long. I'm going to do this at least every other episode is my goal, if not every episode, and that is to check in with our very own Gracious Guest Show field correspondent, because I don't just sit in my house doing these shows. We have a field correspondent who kind of gives us her perspective on what's going on in her life, and sometimes she's out and about, and sometimes, in this case, she was at home as well, but having a really interesting little adventure, and that's my daughter Noelle. So Noelle is she's getting up there. She started as a field correspondent when she was about a year old, and now she's a little more understandable. But she was, I caught up with her recently. She was exploring some interesting little things regarding Play-Doh and painting her nails. And then there's a little thing, listen very carefully for the end. She whispers it, but there's a little thing at the end of this little clip that I have to explain on the other side. So without further ado, here's our field correspondent, my daughter Noelle. Check it out. So Noelle is doing some artwork here with Play-Doh. Noelle, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay. So, I'm playing Play-Doh.
What color is the Play-Doh you're playing with here? Oh, it's pink, right? Mm-hmm. Can you tell us all about what your favorite Play-Doh stuff is?
Can I hold it so I can talk on the screen?
Yeah, go ahead. Here you go. You hold it. There you go.
So, I'm playing Play-Doh, and... So,
what's your favorite thing to make out of Play-Doh?
So I paint my nails with
nails
Mommy.
Oh, okay. You have to hold it still there, honey. What color did you paint your nails? Is it like a purple, kind of?
It is pink.
Oh, it's like a pink. Okay. Why do you like to paint your nails so much?
Oh, so I can talk to Mommy. Can you try?
Hi, Noelle.
Hi.
So what do you want to ask me?
I want to ask you, poop butt.
And...
Hey, hi, Daddy.
Hi. Say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Okay, so if you're wondering if you heard that right, you did. So she leans closely, or has my wife rather lean in, and she's holding the microphone, and she says, "Poop butt." And this is what happened with this, and this is not my fault, by the way. I just want to point that out. So we went to this lake, this place called Lake Tobias. It's a little bit north of Harrisburg, a little northwest of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it's a like a wildlife reserve, wildlife refuge type place where it's kind of like a spread out sort of zoo, and they have some areas where the animals are a little closer up, and you can see them, like the tigers and some of the like chimps and stuff, and they have some of them kind of close up so you can see. But it's then they have like the safari section where you basically ride in a sawed-off bus. It was the tops are cut off, and then over the sharp metal edge they just put like PVC pipe or like some of that drainage pipe you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot or something, so you don't cut yourself on it. And then you just basically ride in a school bus with the top half exposed, like a convertible, kind of this open top sort of experience. And you ride around and you get to see a lot of pack animals along the way, and they come up and you can feed them and stuff. So it's a lot of fun. If you live in the area, I do highly recommend it. And if you're in the military, they let you in for free, I think, or it's either free or like No, I think it was free. I'll double check me on that. But yeah, so a lot of us got in for free, which was amazing, very generous of them. So anyway, we're riding around, and we get to this one section of pack animals, and there's this gigantic Brahman bull. Like, I don't know how much these things weigh, but it's, thousands of pounds. This huge bull, like 7 feet tall and whatever, like maybe not 10 feet long, but maybe. I mean, this huge, huge bull. And he's lumbering alongside the bus. And as soon as he passes us, you can see that his whole, rear end is basically just caked, and really pretty gross because his bathroom habits are just less than polite, maybe. I don't know, less than clean for sure. And all of a sudden, my daughter Noelle just starts laughing at this huge Brahmin bull and pointing and going, "Ha, poop butt, ha, ha, you're a poop butt." And we're like laughing like crazy, like, "Noelle, don't make the Brahmin bull mad." And so she's just going on, and she will not stop talking about poop butt. And it's gotten to the point now where like we pray before we go to bed and stuff, and we're like, "Okay, Noelle, what do you want to pray for?" And she's like, "Mommy, what do you want to pray for?" And my wife will pray for someone or something, and then Noelle will ask me who I want to pray for, and I'll say somebody. And then, "Noelle, who do you want to pray for?" And she kind of gets this mischievous grin, and we know where it's going. She's like, "I pray for poop butt." I'm like, "No, honey." So anyways, that's who Poop Butt is, and now you know, and if you go to Lake Tobias, you'll find him, I'm sure. Anyway, thanks so much to our field correspondent, Noelle. We'll check in with her again next time. So do you remember that scene in the original Men in Black movie where the outgoing agent, and I can't remember off the top of my head what his letter designation is, but the outgoing agent, it's D, letter D. They all have letter, designations. And Kay is played by Tommy Lee Jones, and he's talking to the outgoing agent. They have this scuffle in the desert with some aliens they're trying to capture, and the outgoing agent kind of botches it, and then Kay, Tommy Lee Jones, saves the situation. So the old agent goes, and he's sitting down off to the side, feeling really sort of just sad, and like his time has come. And there's this beautiful scene where he's just sort of staring up at the desert sky, and he says, "They really are beautiful, aren't they?" And Kay kind of looks at him like, "What?" He's looking up at the stars. He says, "They really are beautiful. We never just look anymore." And in the movie, that's poignant because the idea is here's these people who are always dealing with the aliens, the space aliens, the extraterrestrial entities who are here causing trouble on Earth, and that's kind of their shtick. And it's a fun movie, of course, but even in the movie, I thought it was a really kind of interesting observation because for them, it's like they've gotten so used to dealing with the things of space that they've lost the ability sometimes to see the beauty of it. It's kind of become old hat to them. It's kind of just, the stars. And I think that's true for us in a lot of ways. I think sometimes, we never just look anymore. Sometimes it's difficult to look because there's so much light pollution, I think, at most of the places we live that, you don't always really have an ability to see the stars really clearly, at least. And so today I just wanted to share a couple minutes here on kind of my experience with looking at the stars, because it's actually been a very important and recurring and ever-present, I'm not always as good at it as other times in my life, but it's always been an important thing for me for whatever reason. And I really think I have some ideas why, but I thought I'd just share today a little bit. And it really began, even when I was a kid, I just had a childhood fascination with the stars. I have a lot of memories of, being on vacation with my family all over the country. We traveled a lot. To this day, I've been to, as of this recording, I've been to 46 states. And I've been to 4 continents as well. So it's travel is always very important, and travel is actually a recurring theme on the Gracious Guest Show then as a result, because I think travel is a really important way that you can experience Marvel, just on the surface of it, of being able to kind of meet other people and go to other places and sort of see how other people live and, just kind of get out of your bubble a little bit. And along with that, it's true for on the ground and it's also true for above, so even when we would travel, I would, especially if it was somewhere like in a more wooded environment or somewhere where it was a little more rustic or kind of wild, like out west and stuff like that. Yellowstone and Jackson Hole and those kinds of places, and then out in Arizona and Utah, which I'll get to a little bit later here in a second. But really, my most fond memories of staring at the stars really up until I graduated high school. It was a pretty regular thing. I remember I'd probably do it at least a couple times a year, especially when it was like summer, where on one of those like really just beautiful warm summer nights where it's warm and a little bit cool, it's not too muggy, not too cold, where I would just like climb up and lay on the roof of my dad's truck and just, sometimes I'd even put a blanket up there and just lay up there. So I'm kind of above the ground. There's like, I just felt like whatever reason, it just felt kind of cool. Sometimes I'd lay on my Jeep roof. Then once I was driving myself and just lay out there in the driveway. And my parents' house is decently far away from light pollution that inhibits looking at stars. You can see them pretty brightly from my parents' house. Or my grandmother's house when she was alive as well. You could lay on the roof of the truck, the car, whatever, and just look up at the stars. And I mean, I'd do it sometimes for, like an hour, or, half hour, 45 minutes, an hour. Just look and just really let myself be drawn up into. And I didn't have an agenda. It was just like, this is awesome. And that's something I recommend to my students to this day, especially when now, and this isn't what this show's about, but, we all know some of the dangers for sure of way too much screen time and just being absorbed in our screens everywhere, that it draws us sort of into a limit rather than when I would lay on the truck. And to this day, if I go outside just for a few minutes, sometimes it's harder when you're a dad, you have all these dad duties and stuff, and it's just like, oh yeah, man, I forgot to do this, forgot to do that. Sometimes I take my own advice to not forget to wonder, and I go out and I'll just go on the back deck and just look up and, wow, yeah, that's pretty cool. So even if it's for a few minutes, but the longer the better, I say. So I would do that. And then my other grandmother's house, my mom's mom, up in northern Pennsylvania, is real close to Cherry Springs, which is very famous. It's one of I think it's in the top two, I forget the term now, but of areas that for whatever reason, just because of their location, there is almost absolutely no light pollution whatsoever. And there's a whole movement to try to preserve sites like that, so that there's a place where you can actually go and see the stars, as gloriously as possible. So it's I think it's the second most, like in the continental U.S., I want to say, second most visible sort of star conditions where you can just see everything, and like the Milky Way. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I've never been to Cherry Springs specifically. It's right off, like I said, north central Pennsylvania, right off Route 6 on Route 44, like halfway between Coudersport and Galton, PA. So you can look it up online. If you go look, Cherry Springs, Pennsylvania, you can find right where it is. So it's up sort of in the middle of nowhere, north central Pennsylvania, very wooded, very kind of rustic and wild kind of area. Even though it's East Coast, a lot of people sometimes, if they're from big cities and stuff, they're sort of surprised like how much of the East Coast is still kind of the sort of frontier or the wild in some ways, and that's kind of what it's like up there. And so they get a lot of people coming up there to see the stars specifically because of how great the conditions are. So, but even from my grandma's house, or we'd go up and visit and stuff like that. And when I was a kid, I remember till that point, I had never seen the stars. I'd never seen the night sky like I could see it from there, because it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's so bright that when most of us look up, you see mostly black with then stars and constellations kind of here and there. Up there, it's almost like the primary thing you see are the stars, and then they're outlined by some black. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. I mean, it's so much better than even like going to a planetarium or something. To get that visual, to actually see it with your own eyes is just unbelievable. So that's really awesome. And then when I went to Arizona in the Army, it was by far, I mean, to this day, it was the number one experience for me in stargazing of driving. I'll never forget specifically driving through the desert because, we were by a city, on our Army post, there was lighting, but if you went off post or you were driving to or from like Tucson late at night, I mean, there's nothing there. Like, you're just completely on one highway in the middle of the desert, in the very, very southern. We were in Sierra Vista. It's almost on the Mexican border. And if you look at your maps right down in like Arizona, where there's that little like angled notch, at the very bottom of the state on the border, it wasn't too far from that little notch. So it's right down there, and you're really high up too, which is neat. You're almost at a mile high at that point. Even though you're in the desert, you're basically the southern end of the Continental Divide. So you're at almost like a mile high in the desert. So there's this really cool effect of like you're higher to the heavens, and you're also in this flat sort of desert terrain. So it's just incredible. Like, you'll be driving and you get the interior light of your car and you're riding along, but the starlight outside your car is so bright, it's like almost overwhelming the interior lights of your car. Not when your door's open. I mean, like when you're driving and just the light from the dashboard readout, or like if you have a phone with GPS or something. It's just incredible. So those are just a couple things, and there's others. But I want to share a couple quotes here that are just kind of fun, because you can find a bunch of them, and it's just neat to see other people thinking about this over the ages. And Mark Twain, here I have he's talking The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. He says, we had the sky up there all speckled with stars, and we used to lay on our backs and look up at 'em and discuss about whether they was made or only just happened. Jim, he allowed they was made, but I allowed they happened. I judged it would have took too long to make so many. And I love that line. Of course, they was made, but it's just a beautiful sort of childish awe and wonder here, looking up, and especially in Mark Twain's day in 1884. You figure there's not really any light pollution to speak of the way we think of it. So imagining like laying out there in the sort of Midwest and looking up at the sky and seeing that nighttime sky, and for them it would be looking up at it like I've seen it, up near Cherry Springs or out in Arizona. And I can kind of feel like, you look at them long enough, you'd be like, are they made? Or, man, there's too many of them to be made, And then another one, Lord Byron, ye stars, which are the poetry of heaven. So beautiful, right? Van Gogh says, for my part, I know nothing with any certainty, but the sight of the stars makes me dream. And I think that's a really beautiful idea here. You get this idea with all these quotes that there's this kindling of the imagination, a prompting to being inspired, a encouragement to be receptive. And here's Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, incredible as well, very beautifully. He says, silently, one by one, in the infinite meadows of the heavens, blossomed the lovely stars, the forget-me-nots of the angels. That's really cool too, the forget-me-nots of the angels. So there's this beautiful poetic kind of way of reflecting on just the sheer volume, the magnitude of all these stars, just the absolute plenitude. I mean, it's just mind-boggling when you think of how many of them there must be. And that's, think about it. When you're looking up at the nighttime sky, you're not seeing all of the heavens. You're not even really seeing half. That's what really will blow your mind, because there's other stars out the other side, and really, like, your field of vision isn't really even half of the Earth's field of vision. You have a very limited field of vision when you think about from where you're at, and you project out like the entire, if you imagine like a cone, like you're looking out and just imagine this expanding cone of the visible light that's coming to you, and that one point on Earth you're looking at. I mean, that's the tiniest fraction, way below half. I forget the percentage. I over sort of stated it there. I mean, it's unbelievable how many more of them there are. But I think another really interesting thing that kind of follows from that is from a slightly more maybe theological consideration. There's this echo, in a sense, of creation itself when you look out into the nighttime sky. And why do I say that? Well, it's because, and you've probably heard this before, but I never get tired of thinking of this. Every time you look into the nighttime sky, you are time traveling. You really are. Because, what you're seeing is not exactly what's there right now. You're seeing stars as they looked hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years ago because of these vast distances between us and these stars. You know, even the closest stars, we've got, our own sun is, you think of the speed of light. It takes, 8-9 minutes for light from the sun to get to Earth. That's pretty far away, even our own sun. And you think of how huge it looks in the daytime sky. So it's just from a sort of a scientific, astronomical consideration, just on those terms, it's just jaw-dropping, to really think about some of these things that, you're time traveling, you're looking back in time. You might see a star born. Now, people sometimes laugh at me at this, and I'm not saying this is absolutely true that this is what happened, but I vividly remember I think I saw a star being born once, or I was looking at a particular spot in the nighttime sky where there wasn't anything, and then all of a sudden it's just poof, there's like this little, I swear, it's the only way I can describe it, like you're looking at a black patch of space and bam, now there's a star there. And I kept looking at it, and I kept coming back to it and looking at it because I wasn't sure what I was seeing. I thought, it was a plane that like just turned its lights on or something. That doesn't make any sense. But, no, it wasn't moving. It was just sitting there. And I looked at it for a good 10 or 15 minutes, and then it just looked like a regular star. So, it was an extraterrestrial craft. And well, who knows? But I thought about that. That got me thinking, like, if a star just, basically was born somewhere, and I'm looking at that spot when it happens, well, rather, I should say maybe millions of years later. Like, imagine that, though. If you do see something like that, how cool that must be. That, is that chance that you happened to be looking at that spot precisely at that moment when that light became visible on planet Earth at this specific place? You know what I mean? Like, it's marvelous. It's wonderful. I know I use those words a lot. That's the whole reason this show really exists, because these things are very important. They're important because, now you have this quote from Teddy Roosevelt, keep your eyes on the stars and your feet on the ground. I think there's something to that, you have to live your daily life. We have to do the humdrum stuff, but dream. Don't get lost in your tax paperwork. Don't get lost in the next stupid TV show or the next fad. I always say, we were at the shore every summer, and it's like the last few years, it's the same thing. You're waiting outside to go in and get breakfast at this breakfast place that's really popular. And what's everyone doing? Everybody, dozens of people, are sitting there on their phones. Everybody. I'm tempted to do it myself sometimes, but it's like, I was thinking about this last summer, that most of what everybody's doing, now somebody might be checking a very important work email, or, okay, I got that. Fair enough. But that's probably not what they're doing, right? Probably people are just checking sports stats, or they're, playing like Pokemon Go or something, or some sort of fad. That the funny thing is, it's like that particular fad might be all the rave right now. Like, everybody's doing that. Anybody who's anybody is downloading this app and playing this game. But what's funny is those same people will be there next summer at that same breakfast place, and they will not even remember the fad that was the entire absorbing fad that they were doing last year. They'll be doing something else. And to me, that's sad. That's really sad, because it's like every fad dies. At most, it's going to last a few years, probably a few weeks, a few months, and then you'll move on to something else. And it's this kind of consumer mentality where it's like, you're so much more than a consumer. You are a numinous, divinely sparked being. You are a mysterious entity. You are. You may never have thought of yourself as one, but you are. And you are called, you are beckoned back to the mysterious, to the wonderful, to be truly nourished and to be reminded of where you came from and where you're bound to go, where you're destined to go, where you're supposed to go. But you can't get there just by kicking back and letting the current take you there. You have to make some choices. You have to engage. You have to, allow yourself to be nourished by that, or we'll all fall into truly a spiritual death. And that is why looking at the stars prompts what it prompts in us. It's why looking at the sea and going to the sea, being at the seashore, does the same thing. Why? Reductionism can't answer that question because reductionism doesn't get what they are. There's this great line, I think I shared it in the episode called Space Isn't Space. You should listen to that one too. There's a scene, if you ever read the C.S. Lewis Narnia stories, there's this great scene in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader where, and I won't get into which number book that is because that's a whole controversy over the renumbering of the books. But anyway, there's a scene where the children end up on this island and they meet this character named Ramandu, and he basically turns out to be he's this sort of humanoid character, this very mysterious wizard-like guy, but it turns out he's a retired star, sort of, and he gives this really interesting little description, and it's kind of cool. He's living in this mysterious place, and he's starting to be renourished by this bird that brings him this thing called the fireberry from the sun that's going to kind of rejuvenate him. But listen to this. This is just a great passage that gets at this. He says, "I am a star at rest, my daughter," answered Ramandu. He said, "When I set for the last time, decrepit and old beyond all that you can reckon, I was carried to this island. I am not so old now as I was then. Every morning a bird brings me a fireberry from the valleys in the sun, and each fireberry takes away a little of my age. And when I have become as young as the child that was born yesterday, then I shall take my rising again, for we are at earth's eastern rim, and once more tread the great dance." And then one of the boys says to him, sort of head-scratching and kind of reductionist, he says, "In our world, a star is a huge ball of flaming gas." Right? There's the reductionist attitude, right? That's a star's just a big ball of gas. Like, what are you talking about? And Ramandu says, "Even in your world, my son, that is not what a star is, but only what it is made of." That's it. That's it, right? Why do you stare at the stars? Why do I stare at the stars? Because they're not just flaming balls of gas. They're more. They mean something. They mean something. Mike, you're just getting all philosophical. Am I? Go lay on the roof of your dad's car for an hour and stare at the stars and then come back and tell me, oh, yeah, there was a lot of really rewarding experience just staring at a bunch of flaming balls of gas. There's more to it than that, even if you can't describe it. And that's something else we should think about real quick as we bring this to a close. Why do we always think we have to explain it all? Right? So don't fall for that. Again, guilty as charged a lot of times. Curiosity is great. That's part of who we are. We want to go find things out. We want to learn. We want to get knowledge. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But the mistake we make is that there's like this underlying assumption sometimes that we can thus figure everything out, or that it's something we're supposed to do. You're not supposed to figure everything out. You're supposed to live your life. You're supposed to appreciate beauty just for being beautiful. You're supposed to be receptive. We're all supposed to be receptive, a huge, important, and I think oftentimes missing component. And I would argue maybe the most important, in some ways, component of our whole human life is to allow ourselves to be drawn into that, to get outside of ourselves. That's what the word ecstasy means. Ecstasis. It means to stand outside oneself. And you can't make that happen. People try to make that happen through various, illegal things, through various dangerous activities. It happens by itself if you let it, But it's hard for some people because it means that you can't control it, and that's really, I think, what our problem is a lot of times. So just go and stare at the stars and allow yourself, give up that sort of control in a sense to allow, God to draw you into an appreciation of what he's made. So I just want to kind of wrap up here a couple of last quotes. This is from author Vera Nazarian. She says, this is really nice, I think. She says, "When you reach for the stars, you are reaching for the farthest thing out there. When you reach deep into yourself, it is the same thing, but in the opposite direction. And if you reach in both directions, you will have spanned the universe." That's really beautiful, I think. And I think that says, in a very short, pithy kind of way, what I've been trying to say for the last 34 minutes. So we're going to kind of, we're gonna kind of leave it there, I think, and I'm just gonna kind of wrap up by sharing one last little story, and that is, Arizona, like I said, is probably where I definitely have seen the stars the brightest. But the most impactful for me is something a little bit different that kind of travels with me, and that is the constellation Orion. Orion's kind of like my friend in the sky, okay? And I'm not personifying Orion, don't worry. It's not some kind of like pantheism or something like that. But, whenever I would travel, especially as an adult, and a lot of times it was with the Army, and a lot of times it was to either, at least, sort of homesick-inducing experiences, where, you'd, of course, pretty regularly want to be back home with your family, or even sometimes dangerous and homesick situations like my combat deployment, where I didn't know when I got to Iraq how safe or dangerous I would be during that time there, and I was very fortunate, very blessed that ultimately I was safe, but I could have not been. Every day something could have happened, and I remember every morning I had a really weird shift. I worked from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day. So I'd get to work and I'd get set up and I'd send out some of our morning reports. And, when I'd take my first sort of like, bathroom or coffee break or something, it was still really dark out. And I would make it a habit to step outside and just look up at the stars for a couple minutes. And what I discovered very quickly was it always brought me peace. Always, no matter what I was feeling. And specifically, I would step out whatever time of day it was, and I'd find Orion. Day or night, whenever I could find Orion, I'd find Orion. And just knowing that same constellation was a constellation someone back home was looking at too, brought me tremendous peace. And that idea that I always felt home in a way, no matter where I was in the world when I would do that. It was the same sky over my head. And that brought me comfort, that brought me some peace, and, that's something maybe you can try too if you're traveling and you feel far from home. So anyways, get out there, stop listening to me, go look at the stars. If you're listening to this at night, turn this thing off and go look at the stars. If you're listening to it in the daytime, finish listening to it, give me a good review if you'd be so kind, and then next chance you get, go check out the stars, It's something you definitely won't regret, and I really, really recommend it to you, so... God bless you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Gracious Guest Show. And until next time, two things. Until next time, go to the website, check out thegraciousguest.org if you haven't done so before. I think it'll be a treat for you. You can get the podcast there. You can subscribe to it through any of those different places I mentioned earlier. You can check out my blog. I update it from time to time, at least every couple weeks. And also, I put some YouTube videos up, usually once or twice a month. So you can get all that from thegraciousguest.org. My website, if you want to shoot me a message directly, is over at thegraciousguest@gmail.com. So thank you so much. And the second thing I want you to not forget until next time is don't forget to wonder. Take care.